This is a Fox News alert. We're awaiting an update any minute now on the tragedy that unfolded in Miami. 6 people have been confirmed dead there after a pedestrian bridge collapsed on a busy highway. But the number of deaths could still rise as hope fades for finding any more survivors trapped beneath the rubble there. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom, everyone. On a Friday morning, I'm Sandra Smith. And of course, this is a transition now from rescue effort on the ground there to recovery, Bill.
What a story this is as it broke yesterday. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning, everybody, as police and first responders get ready to react there. We know at the Kendall Regional Medical Center, they've received 10 injured. Of those, 2 said to be in extremely critical condition. 8 were in stable condition. They had injuries like broken bones and bruises, abrasions, so we should get an update on their condition in a moment here. This was a 950-ton span of bridge. It was assembled on the side of the highway, moved into place last Saturday, so it's only been there for 6 days. Great fanfare there. The span stretched about 200 feet across that road. It was designed to connect FIU, Florida International University, with the city of Sweetwater, Florida. And you would have had foot traffic there probably next year. That was the plan before this yesterday afternoon.
It's really interesting because as these recovery efforts are ongoing, they're trying to preserve a lot of the evidence there. The NTSB, which we are expected to hear from the mayor along with the NTSB at this news conference that is set to begin at any moment, they are there and they're documenting and setting aside any important pieces that they need, evidence for the investigation, so they can precisely determine and figure out what exactly went wrong, Bill, and led ultimately to this bridge collapse.
You have federal investigators as well for the NTSB. Robert Sumwalt III, he talked about a team of specialists heading to Miami. They were expected to arrive late Thursday night, so they should be on the ground by now to help lead this investigation. And you think about the Minneapolis bridge collapse on I-35 several years ago. It is so sudden, and it is such a contrast, Sandra, when you look at such beautiful blue skies in Miami, Florida, yet you have this massive weight and these cars just crushed beneath it. And there was one car, you think about just time and how things occur. You will see one car that literally has the hood crash and the doors are open. Those people survived by inches. Here's the deputy mayor now in Miami.
I'd like to say that our thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families. Late last night, we transitioned from a search and rescue mission to one of recovery and investigation. With that transition, our police department, along with their investigative and law enforcement partners, are now in charge of the operation. Our primary focus is to remove all of the cars and all of the victims in a dignified manner and not compromise the investigation in the process. The investigation is vital because we want to ensure that this type of accident doesn't happen again locally or anywhere in this country. With that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Juan Perez, the director of the Miami-Dade Police Department. Thank you.
Good morning. Like I was just mentioning, I'm Juan Perez from the Miami-Dade Police Department. As you just heard, late last night, it was approximately 10 o'clock when the determination was made that this no longer was going to be a search and rescue mission, and now it is a recovery and investigatory mission. So at that point, we transitioned and we became incident commanders. What that means is our priority, which is the most critical thing, is to get to the victims, get to the remains of the people that are underneath that bridge, so that we can take them to a proper place so that their families can have the appropriate burial and ceremonies that they want to have, that last chance, the opportunity to have with their family members. This is a tragedy that we do not want to reoccur anywhere in the United States. So with us today here, and actually they got here last night, it was OSHA, NTSB, who are going to assist us through this process and work with us and they're going to do parallel investigations with our homicide investigators. In addition to that, yesterday I had been in communication throughout the day with our state attorney, Kathy Fernandez-Rundle. Today, she has a team of state attorneys here on the scene to help us moving forward with the investigation. But please do not jump to any conclusions, okay? It's important that we understand this is a homicide investigation. That's all it is. That means that somebody died. That is it. It's not mean that there is criminal charges looming or pending or anything like that. Is there a possibility for that? There's always a possibility for anything like that to occur. But does not mean, because I already read some headlines, you know, possible criminal charges. So there could be possible criminal charges anywhere. So we're not there yet. We're not there yet, and we don't even know if that's going to lead to that. Right now, we just want to find out what occurred, what caused this collapse to occur, and people to die. We want to get to the bottom of this, the bottom line of what occurred, so that we can bring closure to the families, bring closure to the investigation, and so that doesn't happen again. That's the most important thing here. Now, if we find something on the way, that is why the state attorney is here with us. They are right now monitoring this investigation along with our investigators, just in case that occurs, and that is it. So there are a lot of moving parts. We mentioned yesterday about the reunification center with our victim advocates. The key thing here is to provide as much comfort and show as much compassion to our victims, which are also the family members that lost somebody. So we have here with us our police chaplains that have come out here to provide some of that support for those family members. That's why it's also key, and I keep reminding you to please, if you happen to find out names of victims, just because you guys are very good at what you do, please do not disclose that unless you know for a fact that we have notified next of kin that to confirm that their loved ones are the ones that are in those vehicles. We know that there's people missing. The family members know that they're missing. And what we can tell them is that we could assume that they're in there, but we cannot confirm identity of who's in there. So we're caught in a bad place right now. So the last thing we want to do is disclose names and all that. So that, you know, let us do that, because we're trying to navigate through some difficult times, you know, that is arisen because of this tragic event. This is a tragedy, and there's nothing that we can probably do to fill the gap that's been created in the souls of the family members and friends. So it's very difficult for us to do that. So this is obviously for the family members. I can only empathize, as all of us. So I ask you to please cooperate in that manner with us. Next up, I think I'm going to bring up Fire Department, Chief Downey, to say a couple of words.
Good morning again, Dave Downey, Miami-Dade Fire Rescue. As you've heard, we're assisting now Miami-Dade Police in the recovery effort. We're working side by side with police and all the investigation agencies to try to bring closure to this incident. We're going to remain on scene until such time as we've removed every victim, and we'll continue to work. We exhausted last night all of our search and rescue capabilities in hopes of finding additional survivors. We used auditory, we used visual, we used our canines, and we've determined that there's no longer any survivors. That's why we transitioned into this recovery mode. But we will continue to remain on scene. We'll continue to work in order to get all of these victims removed. And we ask again that everybody keeps the families in your thoughts and prayers, and understand that this is going to be a long-term operation. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Robert Sumwalt, and I'm the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. And on behalf of myself and all of my colleagues at the NTSB, we'd like to offer our sincerest condolences to those who've been affected by this tragedy. The people of South Florida have been through a lot, obviously, over the last several weeks, and this is just yet one more tragedy to add to that sad book. The NTSB has brought a full investigative go team. We began arriving in Miami on scene here at about 10 o'clock last night. We left about 2 last night. We met with the state, local, and federal officials, and then we did a general walkthrough of the area. In addition to our headquarters support staff in Washington, we have a 15-person team. They have expertise in civil engineering, material science, human factors, survival factors, and we've brought in our specialists from our Office of Transportation Disaster Assistance, who will be here to help facilitate the needs of the victims and the victims' families. I want to distinguish ourselves from the type of investigation that we're doing. You heard the director say that they are conducting a homicide investigation, which is routine for anytime there's been a death. Our investigation is completely different. We are here, we're an independent federal agency. We're charged by Congress to investigate transportation accidents, to determine the cause, to make recommendations so that something like this does not happen in the future. And that's why we are here. We are working with the local officials, but we are conducting an independent investigation that is not in any way related to any criminal charges, possible criminal charges. We don't, of course, have immediate access to the site. We did a general walkthrough last evening, but until we get full access after the recovery operation is completed, we have not had a chance to get up and really start getting what I call an up-close and personal look, a real investigative work, but that will begin. Hopefully this afternoon.
So a few headlines now. 6 dead, as we mentioned. One of those is a student. The names have not been released of any of those who were crushed underneath that the tons and tons of concrete there. A crane came in overnight that's going to help with this perilous project right now, trying to move this concrete and also preserve the scene and prevent the further loss of life. That's the message pretty much from today. Marco Rubio sent out a tweet late yesterday that is somewhat revealing. What he said is that the cables that suspend that bridge had loosened, and a team had been called in to tighten those cables, and that's when the collapse occurred. Now, when asked about that, not one of the officials, NTSB or otherwise, had confirmed that comment, but that's what the senator from Florida had sent out yesterday. By the way, we're told, Sandra, that he's the one who writes his own tweets, and he was on scene, so we'll just keep an eye on as to whether or not that is the case ultimately in the end. Tough to
An interesting clarification there about this being a homicide investigation. You heard the Miami-Dade police saying that just means that there was death. It does not indicate any criminal activity, right. But the investigation obviously pursues all of this. So it is ongoing.
Indeed it is, and when we get more facts, we'll bring you back there live to Miami, though.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions has only hours to decide whether he will fire FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe just days before he's set to retire. Which way will this go? Our panel takes that one on.
Also, the Trump team ramping up the rhetoric, ramping up the sanctions against Russia for election meddling and various other activities. Why now, and will we see more of it? Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace on deck for that and a lot more coming up next.
They're going to have to decide whether or not they want to be a good actor or a bad actor. I think you can see from the actions that we've taken up until this point, we're going to be tough on Russia until they decide to change their behavior.
There apparently is a new development involving Stormy Daniels, the adult film star alleged to have this affair with Donald Trump before he was president. This goes back to 2006 now. Today, her attorney claims that she was physically threatened to stay silent, but the lawyer did not reveal who made the threat or when it was allegedly made. She's suing the president I mentioned to scrap a non-disclosure agreement. A hearing for that lawsuit has been set for July 12 in Los Angeles, California.
That he wants all of these countries that we have an economic and national security interest to have a solid and robust relationship with the United States. If they are bad actors, in this case, Russia has been deemed a bad actor in terms of what they did in their cyber attacks. And if they continue to do it, not just in terms of our elections, but further have cyber attacks upon our other institutions, businesses and otherwise, I think that you're going to see the president continue to take bold and swift action to make sure that they understand that the United States won't sit idly by.
Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer there discussing a possible U.S. shift in its stance towards Russia. This after the Trump administration sends its strongest message yet to Moscow by slapping those sanctions on 19 Russians for meddling in the 2016 presidential election and for waging cyber attacks against our nation's power grid. Fox News Sunday anchor Chris Wallace is here prepping for his show this weekend. We thank you for your time this morning, Chris. So are we witnessing this president taking more confrontational stance against Russia?
Well, it certainly is that one of the toughest things he's done since he became president towards Russia, but picking up on what Sean Spicer just said, I would push back and say that it's neither bold nor swift. The fact is that these were sanctions that were passed overwhelmingly. I think the vote was 98-2 in the Senate back last July. And there was a lot of complaints from Republicans as well as Democrats. Why hadn't the president actually imposed these sanctions that had been authorized by Congress? He invoked some of them yesterday, but there are major sanctions that were still in his arsenal, that were still approved by Congress to go after the defense industry and other industries in Russia that the president did not impose yesterday. So this was a middle step, stronger than what he's done, but not nearly as far as he could have gone.
And Mac Thornberry, the chairman, joined us earlier, Chris, and said really the same things and suggested some possible sanctions that, in a way that the administration could move further. Possibly that's already under consideration by the president.
Well, yeah, and it is interesting. There are things that are left that the president could do. It's also interesting, though. I mean, look, this president is clear has had a curious relationship with Russia and with Vladimir Putin. He has not wanted to criticize him. He's wanted to be conciliatory. The talk about wanting to establish a new, more positive relationship certainly makes sense. But in the wake of all the things that the Russians did in 2016, what they continue to do, what we hear from the intelligence community about how they're continuing to target our electoral process, and now we find out that there were these attacks on the power grid, nuclear power plants, electrical grids in 2016 that we didn't even know about. It is interesting, and it's interesting also that the president has not been as tough personally in his rhetoric as, for instance, his UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, was this week at the UN in going after Russia, as the president was in a written statement with our allies in Britain and Germany and France, talking about abhorring the attack, the nerve agent attack on that former Russian spy in Britain and his daughter. The president yesterday said it's a sad situation. It looks like Russia is involved, but he hasn't been as tough and as confrontational. And we know this president, when he wants to, can talk plenty tough.
What a week it has been, starting out with the ouster of Rex Tillerson, and now word of a possible further shakeup inside of the White House, and a couple big confirmation hearings set to take place in April now with Mike Pompeo. Chris, you've got a lot to talk about on your show this weekend.
We do indeed, and who knows what's going to happen between now and Sunday. But we are going to be talking to Trey Gowdy, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, also a member of the House Intelligence Committee. We'll talk about Russia, the Trump administration's response to it, also the Russia investigation and the call for a second special counsel to investigate bias or maybe even corruption in the FBI and Department of Justice. We'll also talk to the #2 Democrat in the Senate, that's Dick Durbin. Talk to him about those issues, as well as that big gun school safety march on Washington a week from tomorrow.
What a week it's been. We look forward to the weekend. Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace, thanks for your time this morning. We will be watching.
We now know a bit more from Miami. A crane is in place. 6 are dead as that investigation gets underway in South Florida. This is a briefing still underway, and there's a lot to share with reporters and the public, so we're keeping an eye on that. Also in a moment here, the Trump team hitting back at Vladimir Putin and Russia for election meddling. And now lawmakers are reacting to that, and a lot more coming up.
All you got to think about is Ukraine and their interference in the Baltics, Georgia and Crimea and all that. They're trying to recreate a Soviet state, and we got to put a stop to it.
A small plane makes an emergency landing right near Disney World. It happened Tuesday in Florida. 2 men were on board. Incredibly, nobody was seriously injured. The NTSB is investigating what caused the crash.
25 past the hour now. Unemployment hitting record lows across the country, but there is a new survey that should give a lot of people concern. 65% of Americans save little or nothing when it comes to retirement. You know who knows about that? Dave Ramsey, personal financial expert at Ramsey Solutions and nationally syndicated radio host of the Dave Ramsey Show. It's great to see you in person.
Good to see you.
Welcome back here to New York. Are you tolerating it so far?
Tolerating what?
What, New York City?
I love New York.
Well, you're a Tennessee guy. You don't go back to Nashville and...
New York 4 or 5 days days at a time is perfect.
That's all you
then
need.
It's ready to go home.
Okay, just get a little bit of sanity and get back out. I know these numbers don't surprise you.
No.
But I think it's always been this way.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No, it's always been that some people will manage their lives, some won't, and some are facing obstacles that others aren't facing. I mean, income obstacles and regional obstacles depending on the economy in their certain areas. So there's always been a little give and take, a little ebb and flow, but it's always been disturbingly low that people don't do the best that they could do with their money.
What does that mean for the future if you've only got 10 grand and you're looking at retirement? Because that's what the study shows.
It's going to be difficult. I mean, you're going to be buying that cookbook, 72 Ways to Prepare Alpo, and love it. I mean, social insecurity is $1,100 a month, man. I mean, this is no picnic. This is no cakewalk. And so you've got to prepare. You have to live like no one else so that later you can live and give like no one else. I mean, we work with single moms who are going to retire with substantial money, but they're having to give up some stuff today. And all of us don't want to give up stuff today. All of us, we have that little kid inside of us that wants everything.
You give advice 5 days a week because you learn from your own real estate investments that went belly up.
Right.
And you learned a lot from it. I found a few quotes here. I just want to show a few on screen, okay?
Okay.
Here's the first one. I find the regular guy can make it just fine if government will leave him alone. Let him keep more of his money and not take away his belief that it is up to him. Is it hard for you to convince people of that?
It is, because we've had two consecutive campaigns that were successful, that were based on placing your hope in Washington. Now, different ideologies and different sides of the aisle.
Talking about 2008 and 2016.
We're talking about hope, and we're talking about Make America Great Again, which is hope. And and so if I'm going to wait on Barack Obama or I'm going to wait on Donald Trump to fix my life, you're going to struggle.
Here's the quote on that. If you're waiting on a president to fix your life is always going to suck. Have you not figured that out yet?
It's true. And the governor of Tennessee, Bill Haslam, does a great job. We've got great economic development there. We got jobs going everywhere. And I was at an event with him the other day, and he stood up, I think probably because I was there. He said, I didn't create any jobs. I just created a situation where jobs could occur. Business creates jobs. Unless it's a government job, your job did not come from Washington. And so these politicians standing up and taking credit for that and then pointing to, hey, elect me because I'm going to change your life. The problem with that is you're moving the hope from where it should be. See, 65% of people are broke heading into retirement because they're waiting on someone else to fix their life. And that doesn't work.
Yeah. Money is such a personal thing. And you've got a real special touch. So consider that a gift.
I appreciate it.
All right? Thanks for coming here. All right?
Well, we're honored to be with you,
Give
sir.
our best to the folks in Nashville.
We will.
Dave Ramsey, check him out on radio. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
All right, Sandra, what's next?
The White House imposing new sanctions on Russia. It's a penalty for meddling with the 2016 presidential race here at home. Cyber attacks and more. Congressman Pete King will be here to talk about all of that.
Also, Senator Jeff Flake saying he does not plan to run for the White House, but will that change? And did he drop a clue just this morning? At home, there's another attack in Europe, substantial damage done there. New York Republican Peter King now serves on the House Intel Committee. Sir, good day to you, and thank you for your time. What do you think of the move made so far?
Welcome.
Some are saying it's not enough. Some are saying it's about time. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say probably somewhere in the middle. I think it's important these steps were taken. I think more can be taken. But also I think we have to realize that besides these sanctions, the Trump administration has been taking pretty strong action against Russia. We are sending lethal weapons to the Ukraine. We have more troops in Eastern Europe. And also, there were 200 Russian irregulars killed in Syria by Americans last month. And there were no apologies, no regrets coming from the U.S. So we are taking a stronger policy. What Nikki Haley is saying in the UN is very significant. We're signing on with the NATO allies. So I think this is a calibrated increase by the Trump administration. I think more should be done. And also, I'm not trying to make this partisan, but there was a lot of damage done during the Obama years. Like, for instance, the fact that Russia is even in Syria, that's because they were basically invited in by President Obama when he didn't enforce his own red line. So there's a lot that has to be done. But no, Russia is on the move. There's no doubt about it.
So much of that Syria story we don't know because reporters are not on the ground there. The area became too dangerous when ISIS was doing its awful deeds. But you say more should be done. Give me an example. What's next?
I think there should be stricter sanctions, certainly on anything involving Russia's defense industry. I think that we should go more after people closer to Putin, people around him, because he is an all-powerful dictator. But on the other hand, there are these oligarchs who have a lot of control over him, and his future may depend on them. So I think we should go after the oligarchs more, really impose strict sanctions on them. And
why would we not have done that already then?
I think a lot of it is being calibrated. I mean, President Trump, and this is where an honest policy difference I had with him, he liked President Obama when he came in, and actually President Bush also felt they could deal with Putin. Remember, President Obama ridiculed Mitt Romney for saying Russia was a threat. He told the Russian president to tell Vladimir that he would get a better deal after the election. And President Trump genuinely believed that Russia could help in the fight against ISIS in the Middle East. So he felt that we could establish some sort of new relationship. I think Putin is bad. There's no such thing as a new relationship with him. And I think the president is looking at various diplomatic channels as well. So that's why I think they've not gone as far as they can on the sanctions.
Interesting.
But I would hope that as this goes forward, we do it.
Okay, second special counsel Chuck Grassley said this last night with Brett on that possibility. Watch.
We'll give him the tools to do it because they cannot be counted on to investigate themselves. I mean, it's kind of common sense. If you do something wrong, you don't have the fox guarding the chicken house.
This is going to happen. Will the FBI be investigated, DOJ be investigated?
Yeah, I think it should be. And this really goes against two things that I've always stood for. I have a great admiration for the FBI, and I don't like the idea of special counsels. Having said that, in this situation, I believe a second special counsel is warranted because there's so many questions being raised. And I know that if we go back to the Pfizer application and other what appear to be either serious mistakes or wrongdoing by people at high levels of the FBI, that the only way this can be properly investigated is by a special counsel. The Inspector General does not have criminal powers. He can't go after people after they've left the FBI. So to have a full investigation, and I would limit it. I don't want this to be wide-ranging, going after anything any person ever did over the years. They took a free lunch 10 years ago. I don't want that being looked into. But I do think anything at all involving the Clinton investigation and the Russia investigation, all of that together, I think should be looked at by a special counsel.
You wonder where that goes. Sir, thank you for your time today on this Friday.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Happy St. Patty's Day to you tomorrow.
Happy St. Patrick's Day to you.
Peter King, thanks.
Senator Jeff Flake fueling speculation about his presidential ambitions in 2020 by attending a politics and eggs breakfast in New Hampshire. Visiting the Granite State, a pivotal step in any run for the White House. Peter Ducey's live in Manchester, New Hampshire. Peter, is Flake thinking about a run as a Republican or an independent?
A Republican, Sandra. Senator Flake came here today to say that he hopes a Republican senator gives President Trump a primary challenge in 2020. He doesn't know who it would be. He says it may be him, but the centerpiece of his early platform, if this is the start of a 2020 run, is an attack on the president.
But I stand before you today, the rarest of species, the American conservative, Americanus never Trumpus.
So Flake is here trying to find out how many people in New Hampshire share his distaste for some of the things that President Trump has been saying. And Flake's criticism of his party's president is not new. He has been complaining about Trump's style for months. But the RNC is not worried. Press Secretary Cassie Smedley just emailed me to say, President Trump won because of his vision to make America great again, and we're confident that as he continues to deliver on the promises he made, voters will re-elect him in 2020. While Flake was speaking about an hour ago, there were no breaks in the action for applause. Everybody listened very politely, intently, but he did get a standing ovation at the end. Sandra.
Interesting. So why does Flake think that he can catch on in New Hampshire?
He basically thinks the people in New Hampshire understand him more than people back home in his state of Arizona. Because remember, when he announced that he was retiring a few months ago, he said part of the reason was he didn't think he could win a Republican primary in Arizona. But he believes the Granite State is different.
Well, I mean, winning a primary in one state doesn't determine what you can do nationwide. President Trump obviously would never win the general election in New York, but he's our president. And so, there are regional things that take place. But like I said, it's long odds for me.
But Flake is not ruling out a run for president, and there should be no mistaking what this event was about, because it's politics and eggs, and the wooden eggs on every table say presidential primary, New Hampshire, 2020. It begins.
Okay,
Sandra.
Peter Ducey, thank you.
Already? It took you so long. Andrew McCabe is in a race to retirement. The FBI's ex-deputy director in danger of losing his pension if he's fired by 5 o'clock today. But is he more worried about the pension than he is a much bigger punishment that may be in store?
Plus, a baker fined for working too hard.
Everybody's working for the weekend. Everybody wants a new romance.
Go to newdayusa.com or call 1-844-383-1535.
Some breaking news into us here now. New York Democratic Congresswoman Louise Slaughter has died. Her office saying that she was hospitalized with a concussion earlier this week after falling at her home. She had represented the Rochester area since 1987, serving 16 terms. She was the first woman to chair the House Rules Committee, the oldest member of the House at 88 years old. Her office saying she died surrounded by friends and family. Louise Slaughter.
Brand new details expected today on the FBI's handling of the Hillary Clinton investigation. And as we wait for the Justice Department Inspector General to release his report, former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe faces possible firing just days before his retirement due to the findings of that report. Adrian Elrod is a former director of strategic communications for Hillary Clinton. Chris Bedford is editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller Foundation. Chris, this decision is now in Attorney General Jeff Sessions' hands. What will he do?
It is, and it looks bad right now for McCabe. He's so close to retirement and getting his pension here, and his own FBI has basically said, the officials in the FBI have said that he has broken the rules, and they've recommended that he be fired. Of course, we know that President Donald Trump would like to see him fired. He's tweeted that he doesn't like McCabe, and he thinks that McCabe has been unduly influenced by Democrats such as Terry McAuliffe. But Jeff Sessions is a by-the-book guy. He doesn't really care what most people think about him besides his wife. I expect him to go by the book here, although he may, in the end, show some leniency for McCabe because he's one of their own.
You know, Adrian, Jonathan Turley last night on With Martha made a really interesting point. He's a constitutional law professor at George Washington University. He says it's rather curious that someone like Andrew McCabe is so concerned about his pension rather than jail time. Watch.
The real strange thing about all of this is that McCabe so far has been worried more about pensions than prison.
Adrian?
Yeah, I mean, that does seem to be something that we've heard quite a bit about, that he is very concerned about losing his pension, given the fact that I think this is the last day, I believe, that he needed to stay on until this day in order to get his full pension. So that is interesting. But look, I think in terms of the situation here, I don't think that AG Sessions should at all be involved in this decision, given the fact that he's so tainted and has so many issues concerning his role in the situation with Russia. So I think this should be left to career officials. We'll see what happens later today, I suppose.
Chris, what do you expect the political fallout will be from a decision like this by the AG?
This has nothing to do with Russia. This has to do with whether or not McCabe lied to cover something up. And here, the thing that he was accused of wrongdoing initially in the investigation of authorizing a leak to the Wall Street Journal on the investigations that were going on in Hillary Clinton, it's not that's really gotten him in trouble right now. It's that he lied to cover it up. And lying in a federal capacity is a crime. It's the same thing that General Flynn was brought up with, and it could be punishable with up to 5 years in prison. the political ramifications are going to be like a Rorschach test. Liberals are going to see it as some kind of conspiracy theory by Donald Trump and undue pressure on Jeff Sessions. Conservatives will probably see it as something that was rightly done.
Specifically have to do with Russia. But when it comes to any sort of decision that he has to make in terms of disciplinary actions for some of his agents that happened during the campaign, he should abstain from that role. That should be left to career officials to make.
So Senator Grassley last night on with Brett Baer said that the FBI, and this is the Office of Public Responsibility, which, by the way, is the entity that's making the recommendation to the AG to fire him without receiving his pension by 5 p.m. today. They said that McCabe did something grossly wrong, were the words used by Senator Grassley last night. It seems the American people would want more answers, Chris.
And the American people have been seeing a double standard right now with the FBI, where they see people like General Flynn or Blagojevich or Martha Stewart go to prison or at least face prison sentences for lying to the FBI. And then we see an associate director, at one point an acting director of the FBI, possibly getting off scot-free. It's like Professor Turley said last night. Maybe it's like Animal Farm. All people are equal, but some people are more equal than others. And it hurts the rank and file of the FBI and the agents and the gumshoe agents who are putting their lives and their careers on the line to try and defend Americans and maintain justice.
If this happens before 5 p.m., as I understand it, McCabe's birthday, 50th birthday, is this week, and that's why we're talking about this sort of deadline at 5 p.m. today, end of business day today. If it happens, I suppose McCabe could come back and question the decision anyway, right, Adrienne?
Yeah, I suppose he could, but again, we'll see what the ultimately the decision is here. And again, I'm not going to sit here and defend all of the actions by the FBI. I can certainly make the argument that Jim Comey reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails 12 days before the election cost her the election. So I'm not going to sit here and defend all the decisions of the FBI, but let's let due process do its course, and we'll see what the IG report says and what the disciplinary action is.
Judge Napolitano was on the program earlier this week. He said, I've never even heard of something like this, firing somebody so that they wouldn't then receive their pensions. But there is still a lot of questions in all of this. I think that's why we're talking about it today. We'll see what happens by 5 p.m. today, guys. Thanks.
We will. Thank you.
We know what happens in 10 minutes. Happening now with John Scott rolls your way. And John, good morning to you.
I am here, Bill. Good morning to you. That deadly Florida bridge collapse raising all kinds of questions about whether the structure was installed prematurely over a busy Miami thoroughfare. We'll get into that. Plus, jurors in the trial of the Orlando gunman's widow seeing video of the Pulse nightclub massacre. Could the graphic images actually help the defense? And 60 Minutes, did you hear about this? Set to air an interview with Stormy Daniels. Our media panel weighs in on that controversial broadcast. Top of the hour.
Like your tie, John. Well done.
Thank you, Bill.
See you in 10 minutes.
See you.
Is the U.S. and Russia locked in a brand new space race? Has the battle been joined for the first manned mission to Mars? Whoa.
Is there life on Mars?
It was our first Catholic president, John Kennedy, himself of Irish descent, who set our nation's sights on the moon. We're looking at Mars, by the way, in case anybody hasn't seen it. Trying to top him.
So there is the next challenge. President Trump pushing America deeper into space, and now we wonder if there's a space race with Russia. Corey Powell, contributing editor at Discover Magazine. Nice to see you, sir.
Good to be here.
So Putin's talking about going to the moon. Putin's talking about going to Mars. President Trump's talking about going to Mars. Where do you think this all is now, sir?
Well, if talk got us to Mars, Richard Nixon would have gotten us to Mars in 1971. There is a space race going on, but right now the race is really with the robots and not with the people. It's a very interesting thing. In 2020, Russia is going to Mars with the Europeans. We're going to Mars with a big fancy rover.
2 years from now.
In 2020, 2 years from now. The Chinese are going to Mars with their first rover. And the United Arab Emirates is going to Mars. Everybody is looking for a piece of the pie.
In the traffic jam.
Yes.
Okay, so that's 2020. What you talked to astronauts yesterday, right? About a half a dozen, 7 of them. What did they say about that?
So, look, if you talk to the people who've been up in space, everybody is excited about going to Mars. But they also tell you it's a big reach. I was talking to Chris Hadfield, who is the superstar astronaut who was singing Space Oddity on the space station. And he says, look, it's like if you had a rowboat and some and some food, and you said, you know what, I want a road to Australia. It's like, hey, you know how to do it. You got a boat, you got supplies, you've got everything you need, except you don't actually have what it takes to get to Australia. And right now, that's what it's like getting to Mars.
What is people like Elon Musk doing to contribute to making this happen faster or better or more efficient?
So private industry is definitely changing the game. They're making the rocketry a lot cheaper. They can also take risks. They can move more nimbly than NASA, where you have to keep all the contractors happy and you have to keep all the politicians happy. So, SpaceX, and to a lesser extent Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' company, they're kind of rewiring the rules by showing, hey, if we do this in a private, fast, risky way, they're still not ready to send people there, but they're ready to leapfrog, do things on a much faster schedule.
Putin says we're going to the moon, meaning the Russians. They're going to the poles. Is that the right